and the wind is howling. It's like 80 miles an hour, and they're all huddled together behind this like one thing trying to get stoned. And it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, but so many of the pro action sport athletes were using marijuana as a performance enhancing chemical. It was everywhere.
So one of the things that I wasn't expecting as a through line to the book is edibles. So I wanted to ask you, what role do edibles play for you on the mountain, off the mountain recovery? Like how do you use them? How does that work into your regimen?
So I don't always ski stone, but and there are certain, so one of the oldest flow hacks in the world is 20 minutes of aerobic exercise followed by a cup of coffee followed by THC. And people, it's the hippie speedball in action sports, and people have been doing it since the 60s. We have done a lot of work at the Flow Research Collective on caffeine and flow and why caffeine works as a flow trigger. We've done some work on THC and flow, CBD and flow. We've looked at all these things. We're trying to sort of drill in that. We don't train people in that ever, because it doesn't seem to be reliable for everyone. People have very different relationships with THC and different kinds of THC. So it's not, I don't find it something that's useful for everyone. So we don't, you know what I mean? And I truly, at the collective, we'd like to specialize in psychological interventions that produce neurobiological reactions, because I don't want to have to ever depend on a substance for peak performance. But when I'm dealing with pain, I would much rather take an edible than take an aspirin. It's much better, right? It's better on my liver, it's better on my body, and it works better. I'll use it for recovery if I ding myself up. And then I've found with marijuana, there are a lot of times it won't work. If it's cold, it will not work and can take me in the other direction. If I'm hungry, it will not, right? I can't use it to push through hunger. It makes it worse. If there's too much fear, it can mess with performance in unhealthy ways, right? So there's very specific things, and it's, the more complicated the movements, the better marijuana works as a performance enhancing chemical. Also, this is some weird. So we all grew up being told that marijuana is bad for performance, and that's not entirely true. So when they test reaction times, that's what they were talking about. They do it with a light box, like a tic-tac-toe board. So they light up a square and you tap a square, and they light up 2 squares and you go boom, boom, and then 3 squares, boom, boom, boom. So when they test it, it's usually like stone versus sober, right? And if what they discovered is, and it took them forever to do this, because nobody bothered to do it this much, but like in the beginning, if you light up 1 square and it's stone guy versus sober guy wins. 2 squares, boom, boom, sober guy wins. 3 squares, they start to tie. 4 squares, they start to tie. And at 5 squares, stone guy usually pulls ahead. And it's because you can learn those really complicated patterns, but you have to turn off the subconscious to reproduce them. Marijuana will turn off part of the prefrontal cortex that'll block that. So if you're performing very complicated patterns and things like that, marijuana can work as a performance enhancing chemical. But you have to sort of know what you're doing. You actually have to train with it. Marijuana also produces state dependent learning, which is, you heard about it. It's studied with the SATs and purple sweats, take in purple sweats. That's state dependent learning, but it's the same thing. Marijuana produces state dependent learning. And so most people smoke pot in high school, eating Cheetos and watching Monty Python movies and laughing. And that's what they trained themselves to do. And they didn't realize, oh, wow, it's a performance enhancing substance and you can use it to focus, and it's good for certain skills. I covered marijuana as a performance enhancing substance a bunch when I was writing articles for like Men's Journal and Men's Health. I wrote
Yeah.
a bunch of articles about it. But it's not for everyone.
Yeah, it makes sense with the most benefit coming from the more complex movements, because there's so many athletes that will smoke and go train, or a lot of athletes play high, especially with MLB, NBA. Like a lot of people putting pressing the brakes on just banning marijuana altogether. Like I've never been a huge edible guy myself while I'm training or playing, but I have friends in various sports, some of who are still playing, that, maybe once a week or a few times a month, they'll smoke and take batting practice, or smoke and throw, or take an edible, like lift weights. And it does, the times that I've done it, I do feel, I don't know if it's more connection with my body, but just like a different connection with the way that my muscles are moving and things are coming together. And especially when you're doing a movement like throwing, or I imagine it's even more intense when you're skiing down a mountain and you're performing tricks. But like, I feel, I feel like I can feel the out of syncness earlier and more deeply when I've smoked before I throw, rather or compared to sober, where like it might take me like 20 extra throws to feel that something's wrong. I just feel like more in tune in a way with weed in my system, performing a complex movement like throwing a baseball.
It's funny also, I found I'm a mediocre surfer. I'm an expert skier. If I try to use marijuana while surfing, it's terrible. I'm so much more like it doesn't help at
Yeah.
all. Like so I've discovered that like it's the more expertise I have, the more useful it tends to be for me. Um, Again, that may just be me. That may
Yeah.
not be other people, but like and marijuana. It's, I mean, I remember the very first pro ski shoot I was ever on. It was a photo shoot at Squaw Valley we were Palisades. We had early ups. It's like 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the morning. We're on top of this massive cliff. It's the early 90s, and there's like 10 of the best skiers in the world up there. And the wind is howling. It's like 80 miles an hour. And they're all huddled together behind this like one thing trying to get stoned. And it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. But so many of the pro action sport athletes were using marijuana as a performance enhancing chemical. It was everywhere that you had to. I came to marijuana late, as when I got Lyme disease. I came to it as medical marijuana. It really helped with my recovery. I wasn't a huge smoker before that, but I remember like this was in my early 20s when I saw that for the first time. I was like, what the hell is going on? Like it didn't make any sense to me until that was where all those articles I wrote came from. It was trying to figure out what I was seeing all over action sports, why it was happening, because it didn't, everything we heard about marijuana growing up said, no, this is dumb, don't do this. And yet it was everywhere.
Yeah.
And they're pro athletes. They know what they're doing, right? They obviously, like, you can't say it's bad for performance if they're all using it at this level.
Yeah.